Hey there, career seekers. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career. I'm here to help you find a career you like, and dare I say, possibly even love. I'm your host, Amanda Nachman. I'm the founder and CEO of College Magazine. After working with thousands of college students, I've noticed that when it comes to career, there's a lot to demystify. Let's get started. Hi there. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career. Today I have with me Drew Sullivan. He is a senior agent at APB Speakers, one of the world's top speakers bureaus. Prior to APB, Drew dabbled in the marketing and public relations side of the entertainment industry with a strong focus in reality television and commercial dance. An alumni of University of Connecticut, Drew lives in Boston with his partner, Brad, and their Cavalier King Charles spaniel, Belle. Welcome to the podcast, Drew.
Hello, how are you?
Good. So what inspired you to join the world of public speaking as an agent? Because this sounds like the coolest job, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that for me, from an early age, which I think was probably just when I got to college. So I say early age with a pretty loaded statement, but I felt that I was always fascinated by stories and storytelling. And I think, the first time I ever saw real people sharing real stories was through reality television. So I kind of still am, it's a guilty kind of pleasure, but I watch all the Bravos and I watch the Kardashians, and I'm not as much a game or competition type person, but any of those kind of lifestyle docu shows that, show a life that, everyone wants to put themselves in those shoes and think of, it's kind of that larger than life idea. And through experiencing the representation side of reality television, that's kind of where I started out. And I said to myself, okay, I've been at UConn for 4 years. I know kind of the basics of business and communication and marketing. And, I would love to see how I can work in this space that I have this, fire inside of me about and this passion. And I experienced through representation of reality TV a lot of the things that I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. So I experienced a lot of negatives, just things that whether it was people I was representing, people I partnered with on events or on campaigns, people I worked for. I saw a lot of who I didn't want to be.
Okay, so the dark side of reality TV. So this is the first gig out of college.
Yeah, my first gig out of college, and across that, there were a lot of blessings. There was a lot of amazing moments, but then there were a lot of dark moments that you at the time they make you emotional and you feel like they're just bringing you down. But hindsight's 2020, and I think that they taught me a lot of who I didn't want to be, and
Can you tell a story of something that may have happened to just kind of that illuminated this industry for you, then where you realized that it wasn't the right fit?
Yeah, I think that for me, the real trajectory that got me to kind of the place I'm at now is the fact that I saw a lot of people that the reality of their reality, right, as reality stars was just not there. And I think in the PR and marketing world, you put together a vision of what you want your product or your client to be, right? And their vision of themselves has to align with your vision. And if there isn't that alignment, then it's never going to be successful. So I have to kind of go back to my first job out of college was unpaid, working as a glorified intern, and that was the issue kind of from the start for that job being long term, is that for me it was an internship, right, living in New York City, but to the individual that I worked for, who I will name, she thought that I was this was the best thing since sliced bread for me, and that this is a luxury that I had this opportunity, and would consider me her assistant. Well, we all know, and there's been a lot of advancements since 2011 when this happened with internships and paid internships. But at the time, it was pretty customary to have an unpaid internship. So, that part of it was fine for me.
But it shouldn't be like you're the assistant. It should be a learning experience. It should be like you're getting your hands dirty. You're getting like this hands-on experience of what it's like a day in the life to work in this role.
Yeah, and it was. So it was
Okay.
Jill Zarin from Real Housewives of New York City. And it was something where I just, I think that I could have probably been proactive and approached any B, C, D list reality star and probably had the opportunity to work with them, because it's just, I will say, a lot of people think that it's impossible to do. I think a lot of people don't know that there's teams behind these people once they get on TV, and they have followers, and they are, can get paid for things, and there's business opportunities around it. So I was drawn to Jill because she was so intentional with the fact that she had a team. So she, was advertising her internships on her website and all this. And I will say that experience assured me at that moment that working in reality television was what I wanted to do, because of my experience with Jill. And even though there was a huge disconnect with the fact that, and this is why it didn't have long-term stability as a job for me, there was a huge disconnect with what I was giving and what I was receiving in that moment. There was no pay, and I was giving a lot of time, and I was doing real high level, looking at it now from the perspective I sit in now, like I was doing high level things. I mean, like her shapewear brand was coming out, and I had her, personally I scheduled her at, desk side showings with like Elle magazine and W magazine and Teen Vogue, and things that at like a 22-year-old, it's like, whoa, like, you usually have to hire a publicist to do all this. And I was just being really proactive and like putting my nose to the ground, getting these things confirmed for her. And then I hit a point where I was like, no, I need to get paid for this. So I went and got a job, and she was very gracious, because I think for her, she understood, right? So she knew that through her past interns, like, this is a 3-month job, 2-month, 3-month job, and she's never going to pay you, but she's going to give you a lot of opportunities that are going to help you then move into the next part of your career. And when you leave her, she's never going to feel bad about it. She's never going to guilt you for doing so. And she's a friend to this moment, like to this day. Someone that I consider probably one of the most influential people like in my career was Jill Zarin, and the way that she brought me into her life and was so transparent with me, but also, had the ability to say like, no. And I was more going by Andrew at the time, and she'd be like, no, Andrew, like, no, like that, no, you can't do that. Like, whether that was professionally or even personally, it was like, you can't date that person. Come on. Like, there was this human connection with it that I loved. And I will say that was my last positive moment in the reality TV world. I think I moved on to working with people that, had that 15 minutes on a TV show, and thought that it really put them in a category of being at a high level. And I think that when you're in reality TV, you need to own it, and you really need to be a part of what you're working for. So, I worked with a girl that was on Toddlers and Tiaras, and, for me, that was fun. And I enjoyed some of the really, really unique and wild things that we did, when it came to PR and influencer campaigns and marketing. But I also dealt with a mother who could not handle any low point and could not handle reality. And, not every little kid's Judy Garland, right? So it's like, we're not, you can't tell me like she's going to win a Tony in 2 years and be on Broadway. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Like,
In the reality TV world, we have the instant gratification, but in the reality, it's a slow build. It's a journey.
Yeah. And limitations, right? So it's like knowing your limits. And I think that, with someone like Jill Zarin, like, she had a life, and she had businesses, and she had a career, and she had a loving husband and daughter and stepchildren, and did so many things outside of what you saw on Housewives. That Housewives was really a way for her to show what she had, not to create what she wanted. And so I think that in turn, she created businesses and had opportunities from it, but it was because of that strong foundation that she worked her life for, to kind of be in that position of I'm going to be a real housewife, right? And so when you're dealt with the opposite, and when the cards are dealt to you the opposite way, that's what really turned me away from reality TV, was that, just because you got casted on a show does not mean that you're there yet, and does not mean that you can do things that someone else on a TV show can do, because there is that transition from reality TV to a real celebrity. And we've seen it done. I mean, the Kardashians, they are real celebrities now. But when they started out on TV, they were just the new reality show. And I think that through their time, they've created brands and they've created campaigns, and Kris Jenner clearly has capitalized off of the viewership and turned this into businesses for her daughters. I think that for me, it was those dark moments of, you didn't, and you and I've talked about this in the sense of like, you didn't do enough for this, Drew. Like, look what's going on here. Come on. Like, what about your limitations that you're not aware of? What about the work you're doing that you're not aware of? What about the way that society, like, what about the limits of how far you can go in this world? We can't create, a world that doesn't exist. So it's like, we need to be in that space where the work you're doing, has potential to accomplish what you want, but also within a world that is real, not in a fictitious world. So when I moved from, strict reality, being on TV, into the dance industry, when I started working with Victor Smalley and Angel Armas from Dance Moms Miami on Lifetime, that was my first glimpse of like, oh, you can have a fan base and a following, but also do really great work. And for me, that experience showed me that, like, no, Drew, you don't want to work in a place where you're creating stories and people are talking about their life, and that's what they want to be famous for. There's a level of substance that I needed to be happy and to be fulfilled in my career. And with that, I quickly learned that I love the arts. I've always loved the arts. I was that theater kid in high school, and I have two sisters, an older sister and a younger sister, that both danced their entire lives. So for me, when I was put into this, position of like, not only are you going to help us with our PR and marketing because we're on a TV show, but we also have 100 dancers that are all pre-professional and that are going on to big companies and conservatories and, skipping college altogether and moving to Los Angeles and doing the commercial route. And I had the opportunity to build a brand that had skill, that had talent. Like, not only were they being booked to go guest teach and choreograph at strong dance programs because of them being on a TV show, but they also were being booked because they also knew what they were doing and were at the highest level of what they were doing. So that then, it still wasn't enough for me, because there were still moments in that industry where, I had kind of, I guess, like PTSD from my past of like, being at that guest masterclass and seeing that mom like yelling at their kid because their because their ponytail wasn't perfect or their bow wasn't perfect. And so against what we were doing from an education side of things, because it's just not what Victor and Angel did. They really talked about like the passion of dance, the art of dance technique. It wasn't about that. But to just see that, I was like, okay, I still need to get out of this. Like, this isn't for me. But along the way, I learned a lot of those lessons. And I stumbled across the speaking industry because I think because of the experiences that I had, I was very open with how tired I was and how just kind of like I needed something new. But I also was really transparent that I loved being in sales and working with people. So I was like, I'm not going to be happy if I go and work at a manufacturing plant and doing their marketing. I'm not going to be happy if I go and sell pens to universities and colleges, right? So my older sister had just finished an event, and she had used Washington Speakers Bureau and APB speakers for this event through her career. And so she connected me with both organizations. WSB never called me, which I hope they regret forever. But I did connect with the team here at APB, and it was close to Boston. I'm born and raised here, and I really fell into my own. And I think it was because of all of the minutia that I went through in my past. it all led up to that moment when the opportunity was in front of me of something that was like, whoa, this is in front of you and you're qualified for it. But, like, it's also aligned with like, wow, this could be like your career because you've gone through all that you don't like, and you've learned what you don't like. And you may still not like this, but it's kind of in that category of what you always hoped for. So, that's I have a very non-traditional way of getting to where I am. But I wouldn't change it for anything.
Well, you mentioned feeling qualified. Are there times in your career, this, it's such an interesting trajectory that you've had, were there moments where you felt unqualified, and the fact that you put yourself out there for these internships with these big name celebrities or, on shows that people recognize, like, were there moments where you had doubt or face rejection?
Yeah, I was a very self-starter in that part of my life. So, there were times I did join a company in New York for about 8 months. They really weren't aligned with the times of what being a publicist in entertainment kind of was. It wasn't a lot of desk time. It was a lot of on the go, meeting with people, doing things, and then doing a lot of desk work at night, which I was understanding and good with. But I definitely felt there were times that, because I only spent about 8 months at it under a company hub, and the company was a law firm that was extending to the entertainment industry, so they had no name recognition as a company. I always felt that I wasn't qualified enough because the only qualification I had was my work ethic and being proactive and selling myself, which people looked at as, well, if he can sell himself, he can sell me, which they were right. But you really needed to know that. And so I built a lot of my early success with creating courageous connections and talking about, like, what's important to you and how is this aligned with what's important to me and how can we work together? It was never, you went to UPenn or you went to Brown. Like, it was never that. And it was never you interned at three or four really high level PR firms. It was never that. And quite frankly, as much as I did a lot on campus at UConn, which, like, I did a lot that was very aligned with what I think I do now. I never was, there was still so much more there that would have put me in an even better position now to do. So I have to say that I think that feeling unqualified has actually been far more of a footprint on my personal brand than it has been to feel qualified. And I will say that up until about, I'd say the past, like, let's remove COVID, up until probably about a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe. And remember, COVID was, let's say 6 months of COVID. So for only about a year and a half have I actually felt qualified, to be quite honest with you. And I think that that's because, I feel like I was recycled for years, like, in the sense that I had so many highs and lows, that it was tough to ever have that consistent feeling of like, know your worth, you're qualified, you're here, you deserve this moment. I don't think I did. And I actually, to this point, still don't think I did. But I do now.
I think that's interesting that you let the feeling of unqualified fuel you and gave you this energy to say, hey, I may not be qualified, but I have this incredible work ethic, and here's what I can do. And you were fearless. You made connections with people that other people may have felt like, oh, that person is, too high status for me to reach out to. And you didn't feel that way. You're like, I'm a big fan, and here's how I'm going to make this connection. And I'm sure the fact that you're the big fan, like, that you're passionate about their work, that spoke volumes.
Yeah. And it's like, the way I can kind of compare it is that, or not compare it, but explain it, is that for me personally, I needed that. Like, I needed the ups and downs. I needed to spend a year in New York, 3 years in Miami. Like, I needed that to land in the place I am now. And I always say to my boss, who, at this point, I'm a senior employee here, and I'm doing great work for the company. And I feel like the company has grown since I've been here, and I think it will continue to grow. And it's home for me. I always say, like, if this job was given to me, or if I got this job right when I finished school, I wouldn't be here right now, because I needed that. I needed the ups and downs. I needed to have that feeling of feeling recycled. And I like to say that because, there's days you feel new, and there's days you feel used. And then the next day, the day you feel used, and then the day after that, you feel new. And so it's like that constant kind of like toss and pull feeling of feeling like, oh, today I'm valuable, tomorrow I'm not. Today I'm valuable, tomorrow I'm not. But that experience for me was needed to be able to now feel valued completely. I needed those weeds to be able to be there, and I needed to have those days that felt like I was a weed to be able to have the consistent feeling now that I'm like, knowing the flowers from the weeds. Like I know now the opportunities. You're still constantly learning, but the way that the projects I lend my name to, the people that I work with, the way I focus my energy is so different now from the lens I'm in after all of the experiences I've had in the past.
Talk a little bit about what you get to do now.
So I think that for me now, like what I get to do is kind of a perfect alignment of what I've done, but then also what I'm really passionate about. So, I mean, every day I get to work on behalf of people that are doing really great things. And unlike, what I shared with reality TV, where it's more constructing storylines and helping people, with that spin, right? I don't have to do that. I mean, yes, of course I have to have strong salesmanship. When I'm on the phone with a client and they say, our theme for this year is resiliency. And I have to think to myself, like, okay, I have 5 or 6 really strong speakers that can talk on resiliency, and I don't have to create what they're doing, whether that's from a medical side of things and it's more mind, body, soul, whether that's from personal experience. Maybe they went through tragic turmoil and tragedy and they found a way to overcome that or turn, a death in the family or a murder of a son into a movement. I mean, there's so many stories of people that I work with that have turned negatives into positives, or they just take a really academic look at resiliency and mental health, right? So when I'm posed with that type of a question, which is what my day consists of, I have to say to myself, like, okay, who is this person that I'm talking to? And then who is the audience that they're going to be putting the speaker in front of? And then I get to look and say, okay, how do these speakers fit into that audience? Because it's not just about the speaker, it's about the client too. And I think that's where I've seen a lot of success in the work I do individually. And it's not that I'm doing it right and others are doing it wrong, but I think I can say I'm doing it right for me, is the fact that like I put just as much weight on what a client wants as much as I want to put weight on what the speaker talks about, because if that alignment isn't there. So, that's the long answer. And the short answer of what I get to do every day is I get to talk to people that are in need of subject matter, experience, motivation, whatever their end goal is for their audience. And that audience, I deal with college, universities, and prep schools. It could be faculty, it could be students, it could be community members, it could be a conglomerate of all three. But just knowing what their audiences want, and then finding people that are going to be able to come in and give those audiences, the kind of information, insight, the lens from their perspective that they need to be able to, whether it's, go and start their college career, teach better in their classrooms, advise their students better, whatever the goal is of the group. I'm kind of the glue in that situation that gets to put the voice with the group. And I think that for me, that's kind of everything I've done in my past coming full circle.
Yeah. You've probably gotten to see a lot of speakers, right? You've probably watched a lot of talks, and I do constantly just feel fired up and motivated. Are you constantly learning? What is it like?
I think that I'm constantly learning. I wouldn't say I'm fired up and motivated. I think that it's a lot sometimes of just knowing, I find myself passionate about a lot of things because I get the opportunity to hear about a lot of things. I think that I sit from a particular chair of privilege in the sense that I get to hear about, I get to hear perspective that the common person doesn't get to hear. And I think that I also have a position where, even attendees at an event, there's sometimes questions that can be uncomfortable, right? Whether it's a speaker that talks a lot about, the racial issues going on in our country right now, and I'm talking to them about, like, what would you talk about with this subject matter? And I'm that liaison, but I don't have it figured out. So when I'm talking to my speakers about like, oh, I have a client that's looking for this, how would you position this? Like, I don't even know if my speakers know this, but in that moment, like I'm learning something too. So it's like if I'm talking to, Juju Chang from ABC News about, like this group has a really strong Asian population on their prep school campus, and they're looking to have someone come in to talk not only to their Asian population about, there is hope on the side of the rise in API violence that we've seen. They also need to hit that, maybe Caucasian audience that is talking about allyship and talking about belonging and being there for their students. So for me, both of those things, they're information I don't know. So I think that's something that it's not as much about hearing speakers and being motivated consistently. I think that it's more, I get to learn perspective from people that are different than me.
Has there been one speaker or one event that's been really influential for you?
One, that's tough to decide. I've had a few. I'll do like top three really quick.
I didn't say the questions on this podcast were going to be easy, Drew.
I mean, you know what it is? It's good, right? That I have more than one to think of. But I would say that anything I do at UConn is really awesome for me because I get to make it's that real like whoa moment of being able to, the whole experience is amazing. So when I
you were part of student events when you were a student, right?
Yeah, I put on student events, but I wasn't part of like the student program board. So I wasn't like I wasn't part of, they call it SUBOG at UConn. I wasn't part of any of the cultural, I mean, I was part of the Rainbow Center, but I wasn't an active member planning programming. I was more involved in social events. But I will say,
I was going to say it's kind of neat, the full circle, but maybe it's like a semicircle.
Yeah, I mean, it is full circle because these students were me. I mean, whether I worked in the organization that they're a part of or, it was part of the organization that I worked in. I will say that, like when I had David Hogg at UConn a couple of years ago, and to just see students his age, he was the same age as them. And I'm like the oldest person in the room there as his agent. But I also, it was really interesting. I usually take a step back, and in that moment I didn't, because I understand, I know where these kids live, and I know the dorms on campus, and I had a similar experience, albeit 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I had that experience. So that was really awesome because I got to see kind of just it all come together. It also gives me, gives a little regret. I never explored buying speakers when I was in leadership roles in college because I didn't know funding was available. I didn't know you could go to the student finance board and, bring a $15,000 speaker to campus. Like I just didn't know these things.
So if you're listening, know that you have funds on your campus to bring speakers to campuses.
Yes, absolutely. And
hint.
Exactly. And yes, I mean, if you want to, bring in amazing, professional development speakers that can help you know your worth and help you feel qualified. I don't know who those could be, but I can send you some ideas if you reach out
full
to me.
Disclosure, Drew is my agent and he's the best.
So, that was a moment. Michael Phelps I had at a school in Connecticut a couple of years ago. That was more of like a whoa moment. I mean, the most decorated Olympian of all time. That was really cool. And he was awesome. And I felt my worth in that moment. It's very public that he doesn't have a strong relationship, or in the past hasn't had the strongest relationship with some of his family members, and some came, and I kind of had to bridge the gap between like bringing them back to say hello to him. It humanized him for me. It made me feel like, oh wow, like everyone has things going on in their life, like everyone has different things, and I see that often. I mean, that's a big part of what I love, is like seeing like, oh my, you have kids too and you have to bring them to soccer practice, or like, oh no, like you know, with Michael Phelps talks so much about mental health. It's like that just is inspiring in itself, that someone at that highest level can talk about their vulnerable moments and not be ashamed to talk about those. But I do think the best moment for me has to be a couple of years ago at Lafayette. I was with President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf from Liberia, and just seeing kind of her in her element, and everything that you read about when it comes to, not just her, but any world leader, just how formal she is, and what she believes in, and the way she carries herself, and that the power of just knowing like, wow, this is like a Nobel laureate, and a former head of state, and just kind of, seeing her in her traditional dress of her culture. That was super interesting, and something that I think, it won't be with President Sirleaf again, I would assume. It could be, but it may not be. But just knowing that I may not be in that position again, to be at that highest level of world leaders, of everyone in the world. And here I am, like escorting a president of a country that has won a Nobel Peace Prize around campus. I mean, that's pretty cool.
That's extremely cool. Wow. I think anyone listening here, if you're like, this sounds like me, connecting with people, finding ways to have them, share their story on campuses or in organizations, consider being an agent, right? Like this is, I think, a world that not many of us have heard about what it's like, other than like the Ari Golds of, Entourage, which is like, I'm dating myself even saying that, right? It's like, how many of us get a glimpse into your world? I think what you do is so fascinating. Before we go, I would love to know what object you brought that represents your passion, if you could tell us about it.
So before, like when you kind of shared this with me, and it's something that it's like my current passion object. So I think that, you can have long-term things that are just like, whether that's family or something like that. But I think for me in this current moment, and I'm a big believer in doing this, and I will be doing it next year too, but I keep this on my desk and it's my vision board for the year. And so
I love it.
Really
okay, if you're not checking out the YouTube, you need to see this. So in the center, it says, keep it simple. Well, tell us about it, Drew. This is awesome.
For me, and this is something I'm very open and kind of vulnerable about though, and I think life can kind of put you in different directions. It's like, in my industry, it's very easy to fall into the like, what event are you going to tonight? What are you doing next? What are you doing next? Because it's all about networking, and it's all about, in the entertainment industry, which definitely a speaking industry is part of that. But you go to these different things and you can get very much in a routine of like, work hard all day long, and then you go out and it's like, it doesn't matter how professional you want to be. Like, I loved to go out and drink. Like, it was just my thing, right? And it was something that I sustained for a while. And in August, I made a pretty big decision to stop drinking, and I've been sober since, and something that has been a huge impact on my life, not just professionally, but from a professional side of things. Like, what this vision board does for me is that you saw it says in the middle, like, keep it simple. And that's something that I've done or tried to do. I try to do it on a daily basis. But for me here, it's, I have my family up here in this top corner. In a way, I always say that my fiance looks like Prince. So it's a picture of Prince. And I have a Cavalier King Charles, as you can see there. And her name's Belle. So it says Bella there. But what I did was that, I basically put like what's the most important to me up in this top corner. And then I put what used to be really important to me here. So what's that? Like, I say like addictive, laziest of days, get drunk, drama, more shocking allegations, like very larger than life things that you need to put on a vision board. Of course, they're not all aligned with me. But then I really wanted it to be like a crossover of like, you have this and you have this right now, and this is the love of your life, and this is your demons, but that you think are nice. And then how do you have to bring it all over to the other side. And in doing so, you have to keep it simple. So the middle part of it for me is like, now is the time, inspiration every day, disciplined and emotional, don't sweat it, decide for yourself, balance. The ending says like before and after. So on the other side, like, I have things that are like, great success against the odds. I go my own way, even further direction. Do you, travel, maximum efficiency, reimagining things, leave the world behind, takes its cues, which is a big part of things for me too, knowing when enough is enough, lead through positive action. So for me, this is a constant reminder of where were you and what did you do, but also kind of, so for me, that is a representation of kind of who I am and what I will always be and what I will always have. But then also like, which direction do you go? Do you go to what and you go to the things that you've had your whole adult life, which is, your social life and going out and doing this and doing that? Or do you really dig deep and now knowing like where I really want to be? It's all on that other side. So for me, that's my passion object, because it's it's a actual representation of, like, these are the things that anchored you down and were keeping you in a spot that at the time you thought was fine and okay and cool. And by making some small changes and moving in this direction, this is like where you're going to see full success, and you're going to have, be fully fulfilled and be happy with the work you're doing, and healthier and just mentally fulfilled, so that you just don't stay stagnant. And for me, that is a way in which I stack my wins and I kind of forget my losses. And that's how I lead every day for myself these days. It's just, putting all my wins together in one bucket and putting all of the losses down the drain. And so at the end of the day, I only focus on my wins, and the losses are just, okay, cool, they're staying today and they're not moving on to tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a really unique vision board too. I like that you put the where you're at now, or some of the things that might distract you on there as a reminder for you, versus just this is the vision of the future. It's also rooted in, you've got some present there too, and the future.
And I did that after I stopped drinking. So in a way too, it was more like, this is where I was, and I'm not far along in where I want to go, but like, you've got to remind yourself of where you were, whether that's, in my situation of like substance was holding me down, or it could be someone that just hasn't, maybe you have a therapist, and maybe you have a mentor, and maybe you have, peers that you communicate with, and all three of those things help you get through maybe lacking the confidence you need to get that new kind of opportunity. So it's really important to know that you have that inside of you where your gut instinct is not to go for it. And it's good to remind yourself that, but it's also, the real importance is to make sure that that you want to get to that other spot, and that you have resources available to help you get there. But the minute that you forget, what your gut instinct is, or what you did before, or what was holding you back, the minute you forget about that, that's the minute that I think you got to be worried that you could go back to that place, because we'll never have it figured out.
Like a history repeats itself moment for your own life. If you
can't get complacent. You can't get complacent. Like for me, I remind myself every day that a year ago, I, didn't have what I have now, for whatever reason that was. And some people may think that that's like, oh, I don't even want to think about the past. The past is in the past. But like, let's be honest here, from small interactions that we have as individuals, or large events like a Capitol insurrection, right? History repeats itself. And I think history is so fascinating to think of, just how did we get through those tough times then? And how did we push forward? And then you have to take that in your personal life. It's like, how did you rid yourself of everything that was negative? And then if you forget about those negative things, you need to practice pushing that negativity out every single day, because it's part of your wiring system. It's like, those are things that, long-term changes small changes can make long-term change. But if you think that you got to figure it out, like, that is a huge risk to going back to the things you did.
And you can see how far you've come. So knowing you've done it before gives you the confidence to know you can do it again. Thank you so much, Drew. This was amazing. It was so wonderful to speak with you. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to our show. Be sure to check out the show notes and email any questions to yourpassioncareer@gmail.com. Bye.